it seems like we can't go a month, a week sometimes, definitely not a year, without hearing about some scandal related to ukuthwasa komuntu, whether it's on social media, in the news, or on TV. There seems to be a situation. There seems to be something going on relating to ukuthwasa and trauma. And today, I want to discuss that. I want to get into that. Hello and welcome to Sangoma Society. My name is Uhani Wagamakwagwa. I am Umakosi Nomawuto Emsamo, and this is Sangoma Society, where we demystify the ancestral. And today, I want to talk about ukuthwasa and trauma. Is ukuthwasa inherently traumatic? The short answer is yeah, it is. It is. And I'm not talking about abuse, okay? I'm not talking about the instances in which people are beaten, starved, assaulted in other ways. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what ukuthwasa will be regardless of the material circumstances of where you find yourself. There is some trauma that is inherent to ukuthwasa, in that the process of ukuthwasa, ukuba ephehlweni, ukuhlambulula idlozi, is going to bring you, the person who is carrying those ancestors, into a space where you have to confront certain traumas, whether it triggers childhood trauma, whether it brings up financial trauma, whatever it is, whatever your wound is, it is going to be brought up into 2020 vision for you during the process of ukuthwasa kwakho. And the reason that is because without us having the experience of confronting certain fears that we hold inside ourselves, without us cycling through, processing, and releasing certain stories that we hold in ourselves due to past trauma, we cannot truly accept and walk in indlela yedlozi. And I say this because imagine yourself as the carrier, the vessel of your ancestors. When you say that you have accepted the calling of your ancestors, in the process of accepting that calling, in them taking shape within you, you must be cleansed. If they find a vessel that is wounded, there's a purpose for that wounding. There's a reason why you have had those experiences that is completely related to your karma, right? And in that experience, it gives context to what healing you will likely be able to give to the next man. But you can't give that healing if you've never had to go through it yourself. If you haven't released that trauma, if you haven't done the work to heal through that trauma, you're just going to be carrying that trauma with you. Think of it as a poison in your vessel, and it taints everything that comes into that vessel. And then when you go into the work of whatever your ancestors have called you to. It is completely tainted by this thing. You're now projecting your traumas into the narratives that you are faced with. We see this all the time with things like homophobia, where there are certain sects of healers who will preach vitriolly against homosexuality. And it's a very strange thing, because the first thing you learn when you get in ephehlweni is that akunandoda akunamfazi edlozini. There is no man, there is no woman in the context of the ancestors. So how does it happen then that someone who would be versed in that understanding would turn around and be completely homophobic? Well, perhaps they were homophobic to begin with. And perhaps they were sent to a healer who was themselves homosexual. And perhaps that exacerbated their homophobia. They didn't actually allow the process to do its work in them. They held on to that version of self. Do you know? Through that whole process, they missed the opportunity entirely. Because when we accept that calling, this calling, what we accept is that the version of ourselves, the ideas of ourselves, the ego of what we are can go at any time. We are always in a position where rebirth is happening. We're constantly becoming. All these ego deaths, all these awakenings, they're consistent. They're a layer one after another. But the first big one, the one that really rocks us all, it happens ephehlweni. And maybe you haven't twasad yet, but the whole experience of having this ancestral calling, experiencing your spiritual awakening, is making you feel like, there can't be a darker night of the soul than the one that you're in. Hate to break it to you. There probably is. There probably is, and it's going to be either ephehlweni or at one major, coming of age during your process of being a healer. And the reason for that is just that there are ideas of what we think we are, that we hold dearer than we hold God, than we hold our truth and purpose in God, than we hold the relationship that we have with those who were chosen by us to guide us in our relationship and our purpose with our divinity, whom are our ancestors. We hold our ego in greater stance than all of that. And sooner or later, that ego death is going to have to happen. And it's not going to feel nice. And some people, they try to find stories. They tie it to something. They tie it to a situation. They tie it to money. They tie it to a person. They tie it to a place. And they build a new story instead of allowing the moment to do what it came to do, which is to rip that part of you completely open so that you can see the truth of what is in there, so that you can become. Because you're not sitting as your final form. As long as you're still breathing on this earth, you're not in your final form. So you have to understand that there is going to be an ego death for every spiritual awakening. Now the difference comes with the surrender. If you surrender to the experience of any ego death, of any spiritual awakening, of ukuthwasa, then the process, the learning, the becoming is so much easier. It flows. It just is. And it's so much faster through surrender. But as long as you are still holding on to ideas of what you think you are, or spirituality is, or your ancestors are, and you're not surrendering to the moment, the experience, the lesson as it is being revealed to you in your current experience, whether it is ephekweni, whether it is in the preparation for ukuya ephekweni, or whether it is in the post-mortem of ukuba ephekweni. If you are not in surrender, then how are you going to do the work? Because you're not in control. You're not the one that's driving the bus to some extent. I mean, you have the body, you have the bones, you have the soul. But what about all those other souls that are sharing your body with you? What about them? It's you against how many? There's easier fights to win. There are easier fights to win. The trauma from ukuthwasa comes from a lack of surrender. In your unwillingness to surrender, you fail to find wisdom. In your unwillingness to surrender, you find yourself unable to learn. In your unwillingness to surrender, you find fault and blame with everybody but yourself. Once you go through that first heartbreak and you kind of accept it, the subsequent heartbreaks are far less painful. Far less painful. Although they definitely are painful. You know? Can't help that. Because we love what we are. Or I think most of us do or should love what we are. And because of that, it's not easy for us to just like go, yeah, no, whatever, you know, to dying. But that's what we do. If you have any questions about what we've discussed today, please drop them in the comments section down below. I'll make sure to answer. If you find that your question is straying a little longer than 2 sentences, then please know that you probably need a consultation. We sometimes touch on these topics on our social media platforms, where you can find us via Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as TikTok, sort of. And of course, we're on our podcast every new moon and every full moon as well. You can find everything related to Sangoma Society via www.sangomasociety.com. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And if this has been helpful to you in any way, do share. Until next time, mina ngimbumakhosi uNomabuto, and it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. Bukhanya.